Today we're going to be working on a 2017 Acura MDX. We're going to be taking out the radio to install a VLite 2, and we'll be running our cables to the glove box. So our first step will be taking out the air vent right here. To do that, we're just going to use a pry tool. There we go. And it's just going to be the 3 clips, the 2 on the far side over here, and then the 1 on the inside. And then we're going to take off this piece of trim right here. And we're just going to pry on the edge, and then we're going to pry along the top. And then that'll come out here. Got all of these clips going horizontally. Now we're going to take this piece out here. And to do that, we're going to use our pry tool again. You're going to want to go behind the radio right here and pop it out. And then once you have that popped out, we're going to do this top part here. And then from there, you just pull on it. And then we've got the 2 clips that are on the side closest to the glove box and the 3 here next to the radio. So next, on the driver's side here, we're going to take off this end cap panel. And it's just going to be the 4 clips that hold that in. Next, we'll plot the AC vent here, very similar to the other side. There we go. And 3 clips as well here. Now we'll take off this piece of trim. And that's just 3 clips as well. And then now we'll move on to taking these screws off to hold this in place. So here's the 2 screws we're going to be removing. Now with the 2 screws removed, we can just go ahead and pull on this panel. There we go. As you can see, we've got a few clips around the edge down here and then a lot up top. So now that we have this panel out of the way, we can take off this screw down here. And we'll move on to the other side. Alright, so we're going to pull off this piece of trim next. For that, we're just going to pry underneath it. There we go. And this one's just got the 3 clips that hold it in. And then next, we're popping off this panel right here. It's going to be similar to the passenger side. We're going to go in between the radio and this panel. And once that's loose, we can pull it down. There we go. And you mainly just have to get it off this ledge on the corner here. And now we'll move on to taking out the radio. So to pull out the radio, there's going to be some screws up here behind this panel. So we're going to go ahead and take this out. We've got 4 Phillips heads that hold it in. Now that we've removed the 4 screws, we can just go ahead and pull on this to get it out. Sometimes it'll get kind of caught on top here, so you have to kind of pull down on it. But there's no clips or anything that hold this in. It mainly just snaps onto these posts right here and then sits behind this piece of trim. Next, we're going to have 2 8mm bolts. They're attached to the bottom of the radio and they hold it in. You don't need to fully remove them, but you do need to loosen them for them to slide loose. So to do that, we're going to use our drill here, and we have a little 90-degree adapter, which helps a ton with getting these. You don't necessarily need one. You can use a wrench as well, though. There we go. Now that we've got those loosened, we'll work on pulling out the radio. So to get the radio out, we need to take off this front face panel here. We're just going to pull on the bottom. And we just want to get that loose. We don't want to pull it all the way out as far as we can. And then you're going to want to take your pry tool and pry at the top up here. There we go. And then we'll do the same on the other side. And once you have that loose, we're going to have this plug down here. We're going to need to unplug. And we'll set this to the side. Now to get out the radio, we're going to remove these 4 screws. And now that those are loose, we can just pull on the radio. And you might have to wiggle it a little bit to get it loose, but it should come out. These are the 8mm right here, and then we got the one on the other side. Depending on how far out you took these, you might have a little trouble getting the radio out because of this bar, so just be aware of that when you're pulling it out. We're going to start unplugging the radio so we can pull it out further. The first step is going to be on the bottom for these buttons here. There's a plug right on the back. That's this one here, just plug right on top. And then we'll get this out a little further. Now that we've unplugged the bottom controller, we're going to unplug the hazard light up here. And it's just a clip on top that you push in, and that'll slide out. And then the radio will come out even further. And then back here, we're going to be doing our VLine connections. So we're just going to unplug this fully to give us more room to wire manage. You don't necessarily need to unplug everything. You can just unplug the cables that you need to connect the VLine, but we find it easier to cable manage if you just unplug it fully. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and connect the reverse wire. In your kit, you should have these instructions that show you where to connect it. So we're going to follow these and we'll show you what we're doing. So first we're going to start with our P-tap here. I'm just going to go ahead and open that. And then you're going to want to loosen the top part here. And from there, you're going to grab your MCF HA3 cable like this. And you're going to find the reverse wire. And then you'll need to strip a little bit off the top here. And I'm actually going to fold this in half because it's a little too long. And then we're just going to insert that into the top that we unscrewed. Once you've done that, it should look like this, and then we're just going to screw the bottom back on, or middle in this case, and then we'll take off the bottom here, and then we're going to use this to connect to the factory reverse wire on this plug. Alright, so this connector here is our 24-pin connector, and then we've got our reverse wire over here, pin number 24, so we'll go ahead and connect to that. And then we've already tested our wire, so we know this is correct. If you need help testing the wire, we do have like 3 different videos showing that. But mainly we're looking for the reverse wire that shows 12 volts DC only in reverse. So now we're going to go ahead and connect the rest of our MCF HA3. We're going to do that by just plugging in here. And then we've got our other connector right here. And this one did have some bent pins. When I first tried to plug it in, it was a tiny bit off. So if you see that your connector only goes in like halfway, on this one it was about like right there, make sure to pull it out and double check that all these pins are straight before trying to push it in any further. Otherwise you can damage the harness. So next we're going to go ahead and connect our VHON 3D cable. It's going to be these 2 white ends here. You're going to find this factory connector, and you'll connect that into this side. And then this end here is going to go into the radio and we reassemble it. And the last cable we have here is our WL toy USB. It's got 2 ends to it. The squarish end is actually going to plug into the back of the radio, and that'll leave the factory USB disconnected and will be connected to the radio there. And then this end will be running to the VLine itself and plugging into the gray pigtail. So the last cable we'll be installing is the toy USB-R cable. This is to retain the factory USB port. So this cable here that plugs into the back of the radio runs directly to the USB port. And if we plug in our toy USB-R cable, the retention cable, it'll turn that into a USB, and then you can run this to the VLine or VLite. So to get our cables into the glove box, we're going to need to open this up right here. You're going to just push down on both levers on either side and then pull out. And then we're going to be able to run our wires around the edge here, but to make it easier to get them through, we're going to go ahead and pull out the filter itself. And for that, you're just going to squeeze on both sides and it slides right out. And we'll just set that to the side for now. And then our cables are going to run through right over here. So our wires back here, we're going to run them to the glove box going this way down here. Right behind this bunch of wire, you should be able to see a light back here. It might not be much on camera, but if you shine a light through down here, you should be able to see it, and we'll run our wires down that way. So right now, we're just running our wires through to the glove box through that back hole. As you do that, make sure none of your wires here get tangled up. And then another tip would be on the glove box side of things, when you reach your hand through behind by the filter, you can always guide the plug and feed it from this side. That tends to help instead of just trying to grab it behind the glove box and pull it. Feeding it through this side works better. There we go. So now that we've got all the cables pulled through, we'll go ahead and wind up some of the slack here, and then we'll put the radio back in. So the glove box has this shelf in it, which we've mounted the VLine to with Velcro. And from here we just cable managed all of our wires, and this actually fits upside down. So if we rotate it like this, it slides in right here. And then we'll pull all of our slack back behind the radio and then tidy up those wires. And then this is the air cabin filter door, or well, the cover. We notched off one of the corners here, so we just cut that off, and that leaves room for all your V-line wires to go through. And doesn't affect anything in the vehicle since the cabin filter already has its own door. So here we have our USB retention cable. And as we were tidying it up and getting all the wiring managed here, I wanted to show that you do need the USB extension cable, the 3-foot one, or any USB extension if you are using the retention cable. So now we're ready to connect everything back into the radio. So we're going to start with all of our plugs that go in on the bottom. And this is where our VHON3D plugs in. It's right around the middle. And this end goes back to the factory one, right here. And then this is where our MCF HA3 plugs in, and the other connector did plug in on the bottom. And then lastly, our WL Toy USB will go right here. And we're just going to double check and make sure there's no extra plugs that we're missing. So now we're ready to put the radio back in. And we'll make sure we plug in the hazards as well. So make sure you pull this up. And then from here, you just want to work those bottom 2 bolts where they get around the trim. All right, so now we're going to put the radio in. There we go. And once it clicks into place, you should see all 4 of these line up. And we'll go ahead and put in those screws now. So now that we have the radio in, we can go ahead and plug this plug in back behind these controls here. And then this one will go into our next piece of trim here. So we'll go ahead and put this in place. There we go. And then our blue plug down here is going to go in the back. There we go. Now that we got that in place, we'll move on to the rest of the trim surrounding it. So next we need to put in the trim down here, but first we want to go ahead and tighten those 2 8mm bolts. So we'll do that next. Now that those are tight, we'll put that in. And for this trim, you want to slide it in from the bottom first, and then push up. And then it's just going to tuck behind here. And if it's in place correctly, these should all line up, top and bottom. And then we'll put in those screws. Next, we're going to put on this piece of trim over here. And it just lines up and clicks into place. And you want to make sure that it tucks under right here. You might need to use a pry tool, but in this case, it fit in perfectly. Next, we'll move on to this, and it just pops right into place. And then lastly, on the passenger side, we're going to put in the AC vent. So for the driver's side, the first thing we'll do is put this piece back in. You have to lift it up to get the side closest to the center console in. And then from here, you're just going to line it up with all the clips and then push in. And as long as everything's lined up on the seams around here, it should be good. And we'll put the screw back in right down here, or bolt in this case. Next, we'll be putting on this piece, and it just pops right into place. And then we'll be putting in the 2 screws over here. Now that those are in, we'll move to the surrounding trim. So I'll put this piece on next, and that goes right here. Just snaps right in. Then we'll do our AC vent next. And lastly, for this side, we're going to put our end cap cover on. And the last piece of trim is going to be over here by the start-stop button. And then here's the last piece that just pushes in here. And now I've got everything fully put back together with the VLite installed.